What's going on, everybody? This is your man, Big Stu, Scott Stewart, or Professor Stewart. It really does depend on how you know me. Welcome to Dope People Podcast. I am your host, Scott Stewart. I am a career educator, but I didn't go to school for education. I fell into it. 18-time award-winning teacher. We'll get into all of that later. I am blessed, honored, thankful to have the illustrious Miss Beulah Mcloyd here. Let's make some noise for Beulah Mcloyd. That's right.
Good morning. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm doing well this fabulous morning. Thank you for asking. It's so nice to be able to just chat with you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get into it. You are like the celebrity educator.
Oh,
We'll talk
wow.
about that in a moment. You've been able to rub some elbows with some folks. You've made some progress in the areas of education. But before we get into all of that, let's get to know you a little bit. A lot of my network may not even know who you are. So let's start with a short game, if you don't mind, of this or that. That's a classic one. Let's do a
Okay.
little this or that.
Okay. I
All
like
right.
it.
All right. So let's start with nights on the town or quiet evenings at home.
Ooh, quiet evenings at home.
Okay. All right. That's a good one. Spotify or Apple Music?
Apple Music.
Wow. Okay. All
Apple
right.
Music. Yes. I think mostly because I'm an iPhone person.
Okay, because that was going to be my next one. Android or iPhone?
iPhone all the way,
iPhone all the
except
way.
if I'm taking pictures. I do like Android's pictures a lot better.
The S21, they are not paying me for this. The Galaxy S21 is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Blows the iPhone out of the water.
I'm telling you.
But they not paying me for that. So that might get cut out. I don't know. Summer or winter?
Summer.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple of more. Midwest or West Coast?
Oh, that's a hard one. Okay, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. If I could have the Midwest people on the West Coast, that would be great.
Well, believe it or not, and you already know this, Los Angeles is that.
Right.
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 We'll get to that. There's a lot of Midwesterners on that West Coast for sure.
Yes.
All right. Here's another one. Let's gonna get into it. Traditional classrooms or hybrid learning?
Ooh.
We're gonna jump right in.
Traditional or hybrid? I would say hybrid.
Okay. All right. We're gonna circle back on that. Thank you for playing a round of this or that. So, Beulah, you are an educator. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Are you from Chicago? Are you born and raised in Chicago?
Yes, I'm a native Chicagoan.
Okay.
I was born and raised here in the city. I grew up in Englewood.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Englewood always putting out some dope people in Englewood.
Yeah.
It's not all the negative stuff.
No, I always said that when people really make it from Englewood, they do really, really well. Because you have to have so many different types of skill sets so that, if you win and if you actually make it, you get your education or whatever, have a nice job or whatever. Like you understand people so well and navigating environments so well. So when you couple that with something else, it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat.
What kind of student were you?
I was the same type of student as I am an adult. And so if anybody knows me, like right now I'm still working on, I'm in a PhD program. So I've always really loved school and education. I remember when I was in like third grade, they used to call me Miss Dictionary because I was always reading. My mom was a teacher. She's a retired teacher. So we kind of grew up in the house with like just education running through our DNA. So I loved school, always
Okay.
have.
Where did
Mhm.
you graduate? Like, were you like top 10% of your class? Were you
I was in the
really?
top 10%, and I graduated summa cum laude from college as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So how did you find yourself in education? Was that the goal? You said education was in kind of your DNA. So,
Yeah. So, here's my leadership story. I was born and raised in Englewood. Mom was a public school teacher. And back then I didn't realize that teachers were like working poor. This was in the 80s when my mom was teaching. So I think about what teachers make today and what I was making when I first started teaching, and I don't know how my mom did it, honestly. She put two of us through private school. So I have an older brother. She put both of us in private school. And so that was always just really weird to me. Like, I used to go to school with her sometimes on her last day. She taught at William Penn on the west side on Avers. And I remember thinking, like, man, why isn't this good enough for me to go where my mom is working? And then back then I figured out, oh, wait, there are like these two different educational systems, right? Actually, three. You went to selective enrollment, neighborhood, or if you could go to like Catholic school, that's where you went. Charters weren't really a thing. And you know that back then they weren't a thing. So in my mind, I always wanted to be able to fix that, right? I didn't think that it was fair that kids should have to either pay or test into a school to have good education. So I went into education on purpose to kind of fix it. So if you my entire career has been in neighborhood schools intentionally. Neighborhood, west side, south side. Michelle Clark was a magnet school, but in CPS, magnet just means you test at the 24th percentile. It's not even like you test 90. It's like you're doing a little bit
right.
better than everybody else, right? So I really went into education to level the playing field so that kids who grew up in neighborhoods like mine just had a shot at high quality education. Yeah.
So let's talk about education today. What is your educational philosophy?
My educational philosophy actually is rooted in the Latin root word of education, which is educare, which means to draw out, right? So I think the role of an educator is just simply to draw out the natural genius of the student who's sitting in front of you, no matter who he or she may be, what background they have, no matter how they come to us. It's our job to pull out the brilliance that's there, not necessarily to tell students what to think or to be a disseminator of knowledge, but really to kind of pull it out of students. Yes, give them the basic fundamental skills, right? They have to know how to read, write, think critically, and all of that. But once they've been given those basic tools, it's more of our job to teach kids how to think, right? And analyze the world around them so that they can then go on to make impact in their communities. So I think education is really like a social justice sort of tool. Is something that we really should be using to help keep moving generations forward in our communities. And we can only really do that if honestly we're thinking about the student as the center of the learning and not the teacher as the center of the learning.
Is that happening? Would you say that's happening in the American public school system where the default is to think about the student first? Or is that an initiative that you have to kind of get people to make a priority, make students the priority? Which one is it from your perspective?
Yeah, if you're truly doing that, it's a revolutionary act because the system is not really designed for that. The system is designed, and we know this historically speaking, right? Schools were designed to create citizens and workers. That was basically the two main functions historically of schools in America, right? So as people come over, we teach them how to be a citizen, and we create this common dynamic or common identity that's based and rooted in Americanism, whatever that ideal means, right? And then so that's why for so long we were excluded from that process, because it was about citizenship and work, right? So if that is if those are the principles that kind of sit on the underpinnings of the system itself and the foundation, if we're doing what I'm proposing, we're actually having sort of a revolution, a mini revolution, as it pertains to education.
How's that working out? How is that working out? You were revolutionary. Let's go back. So the question is, how is that working out? But let's go back to where I believe kind of was the beginning of your tipping point. Chicago, Walter H. Diet High School. I think the school I think it came on my radar. First of all, it wasn't always a high school. It was an elementary school.
Correct.
And I remember Diet first got on my radar for girl gangs in 6th and 7th grade. Like, it was going down at Diet almost like on a daily. It was literally on a daily basis, but it wasn't guys, it was girls. And also that's the school where I learned that Chief Keef attended.
He did.
And so that didn't really help. No disrespect to Chief Keef and his success as an artist today, but at that time, that wasn't really helpful to the brand of Diet. And Diet went through its own transformation, kind of was trying to be shut down because it was such a menace to the community. But then it was kind of saved. Can you add the context? Because that's where you kind of hit the scene amidst a lot of controversy in public education here in Chicago. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so let me rewind the tape a little bit and historically talk about Diet. Diet was a thriving middle school at one point in time, right? So it didn't start off, because I always want to pay homage and provide the context to how it sort of started to spiral downward. And it was really a function of divestment, right? So you have this school that functions as a middle school. It's a high performing middle school. Then you have King High School that turns into a selective enrollment high school, which then means Diet now just it shifts from a middle school to a neighborhood high school, right? So basically it's what I talked about when I said is one of the things I wanted to eradicate, which is this, okay, you have selective enrollment, so you get all your top testing kids to go there. They have high quality. You start to pull, then some schools in Englewood closed down. The schools in Englewood closed down. Boundaries changed at Diet. So now you throw all these kids in one building who really have coexisted in other places. So then you start to get the fighting, and then you start. And so
not to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Let's not exclude. This is also the buildings, the project buildings along State Street,
right?
Again, being torn down, and so there's just a lot of underpinnings that are propelling and perpetuating this rumbling at Diet. Please continue.
Yeah, so it's happening. All of these conditions create the perfect storm for chaos, right? And kids get caught up in the chaos, and they don't necessarily have all of the social skills to handle it. And so, you start to see parents pull their students out. You start to see a demographic shift in terms of people leaving Chicago. So then enrollment declines. Then you have fewer programs to offer because you can't offer programs without children. So then it just becomes this cycle, this vicious cycle, to where by 2014, the last graduating class had 13 seniors. Right. So that's how we get to that point.
Wow.
13. So 13. So John Claude Brazard comes in and says, we're gonna close the school down. And of course the community went into an uproar about that. Right. So then you have 13 community members from the Kenwood Oakland community organization who come in, and they went on a 34-day hunger strike. Right.
Led by G2 Brown. Shout out to G2 Brown. Very good
Yeah.
friend of mine.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And so I met Michelle Clark on the West Side, and my boss comes upstairs. He's like, I really think you should apply for this school because I think it would be a great fit for it. Now, mind you, I knew some of the backstory, but I didn't know necessarily all of the dynamics, the political dynamics, and the different groups who had interest in diet. It was a lot.
Yeah, you were really kind of thrown into. There were a lot of people. I was one of them. I didn't know you at the time. I'd heard about you, and I think that's why I heard about you. It's like, who is? They really about to try to throw this principal in the midst of this? You like? They must know something I don't know, because you got to be really strong to deal with what they're about to deal with. And G2, who you met the way you met him, and I'm sure it was a very strong personality.
Yes.
And I just thought, let me just be honest. I can say this. I thought it was a little unfair that they were throwing you in there. How did you receive that? How was that for you?
So I guess sometimes a little bit of ignorance can be your saving grace, because you go into it green, just like, okay, I just want to do a good. First of all, I live in this community, right? Like, I'm in Bronzeville. I live in Bronzeville. So I definitely want this community to have a good high school, right? That's my first lens. My second lens was I always wanted to start a school. When I was probably in my second year as a principal, this was around Renaissance 2010. Oh, yeah. I actually had a proposal for a school, Englewood Media Arts and Sciences School, that actually made it to like the final round against Noble Street. And of course, Noble Street, got the bid for the school, but it had always been a huge dream of mine. And if you hear dog, I'm sorry.
No worries, no, we're good.
Okay. It's upstairs. It had always been a dream of mine to start a school, right? So it was a challenge for me. I was on my second contract at Michelle Clark. So it was like those systems and structures were moving. That school was now one of the schools for top 5 early college STEM schools. It was one of the first 5, and then it was one of the top 5. So I got into school on probation. We were in good standing, doing really good work. So it was like, okay, what's the next challenge for me? And so this was a challenge. Like, diet was a challenge. Ironically, G2 and I have never had a negative interaction. Like, never. I know that's hard for people.
I can believe that.
Like that may be to outsiders who don't know him. That may be difficult for some people to understand. But one of the first people I called when I got the job was G2, and we had breakfast at Beulah's in the morning. One morning. And I was just like, tell me your story. Just do a download. Tell me everything you know about the school. Tell me everything that transpired.
Wow.
Because I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Because from the outside looking in, it might look like you all were fighting.
Yeah.
And I can see, but I can see that also. I know G2, and I know his intention. I know his heart. I know his spirit, and I know although he's strong, he's a big, burly dude, bald head, dark skin, very intimidating, but he's a bear. He's a teddy bear, and he's very respectful, very professional. So I get that. So you all have breakfast, you do the download, you add diet, and then there's this 34-day hunger strike. You guys are in the news every day. Some people want to shut the school down. The G2 and the community are like, absolutely not, trying to keep it open. Were you sent there to shut the school down, or were you sent there to make the school thriving again? It looks like you were positioned to be there. Go over there and shut this school down. What was that?
No, actually, I was sent there to reopen it as an arts high school, an open enrollment arts high school. So they had, by the time I came on board, they had already made a decision to keep it open.
Okay, all right.
And so my job was to kind of go in and revive it, right? Revitalize it. So, I spent a whole year marketing, talking to families. Actually, diet, if you look at the way we marketed diet, I think it kind of changed the game in terms of how schools market.
There was even talk around that, like you all were doing billboards when schools weren't necessarily doing billboards. There were a handful, I think diet was in that pool, but that wasn't a real thing to market a school. Like, how do you effectively do that?
Right.
So that was new. That was new to see you diet on the Dan Ryan, or to see diet on the side of the Chicago Transit Authority buses, CTA buses. So you led that.
Yes. Okay. I of course had the marketing strategy, but then worked with this Black-owned marketing company, like printing company, to redesign the logo and just really rebrand the school so that all the visuals looked a certain way. If you notice, like, they all had the same sort of branding, colors, so you could tell from just glancing if it were a diet billboard, or if it was something related to diet, because the brand consistency was really important to me, particularly when it came to like people thinking about the school in a certain way. I know it worked because people really thought it was a selective enrollment school. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not. We got neighborhood kids on 51st Street. Like, this is not a selective enrollment school. It has a selective enrollment feel, which I think every school should have. But in terms of kids having specific test scores to get in, that wasn't a thing.
And so also clear this up for me. I think I understand it for the listeners as well. When you got there, it was already a high school as well.
Yes.
Okay. Then and before you got there, the last graduating class had 13 people. You were kind of revitalizing it, and so it became Walter H. Diet School of Performing Arts.
Yeah, Walter H. Diet High School of the Arts. Yeah.
High School of the Arts.
Yes.
All right. And then let's jump ahead a little bit. You all get what seems like, again, I'm the outside looking in, right? Seems like this is our first in-depth look into this conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, it seemed like you guys got $1 billion. You got millions of dollars to kind of revive, and I'm exaggerating, but you did get a lot of money.
Yeah.
To pour into the school with resources, tech labs, refacing. You got a lot of publicity. Mm-hmm. I know I'm skipping ahead, but at one point Chance got involved. I think that was a little later. But before that, you had the guy, a billionaire, get involved. What's his name again?
So Howard Tolman.
Howard Tolman, yes. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, so the initial investment from CPS for renovations and tech lab, and because one of the things I stressed to central office was, if you want me to have an art school, this building has to be retrofitted to be an arts school. So we had, and this still does, the ballet studios with the Marley floor, a black box theater, a tech lab for parents and students. Every kid had a Chromebook. All of that. That was the initial investment.
And it's a recording studio in there.
Yeah. So that was, as the years progressed, that was a vision of mine, right? To make sure the kids had a recording studio, because when we think about music, the way adults think about music is not how kids think about music. They think about sound engineering. And they think about computers, old school. I play piano, so I think piano. They think that. So yeah, that was something that we prioritized down the line. The interesting thing is that I know a lot of people think we had a whole lot of money. We really did. After that initial investment, we had the same per pupil funding as everybody else.
Okay.
The nuance was, I was intentional about building relationships with people that yielded dividends. So Howard Tolman was originally on our advisory council when I was starting the school. So after we got up and running, I invited him out to the school to take a tour. I'm like, just come out, see it, and see everything that you all worked so hard to champion for, to make sure this was a success. He came out, I just started walking him through the school and telling the story. You know how this is. I started telling the story, and he was blown away. And then so he decided to partner with us. And so he actually, we got in-kind donations of him building out an entrepreneurship room in the school, just based on our relationships and conversations. And he was like, you know what? I want to come out and teach an entrepreneurship class for 8 weeks with a cohort of students. We picked the kids. We had an application process, picked the kids, and literally every week for 8 weeks, it was about 8 to 10 weeks, he would come out and teach kids about entrepreneurship. And we even collaborated on a book called Entrepreneurship Principles, specifically for that class. That it's on Amazon. You can still get it, but it's called Perspiration Principles, actually. So it was just the relationships, and then from that relationship, we got other relationships because he was the CEO of 1871, which was the tech incubation space. So the kids would go out to 1871. They would hear from business owners. There's this Black-owned business company that actually came out, talked to the kids. Then they gave us a virtual reality lab. So from that initial relationship, then we had another relationship. So now there's a virtual reality lab in the school as well. So that's sort of how it went. People think they were like, "Oh, you had all this." I'm like, no. It was really, told you I'm from Englewood. Like, I know how to take a little bit.
Stretch it out.
And stretch it out.
Take us in, because, we don't take us into that conversation. What are you telling? What are you selling? How are you saying? And this is for other, high producing educational leaders. This podcast is for a very specific audience. This is not for everybody. This is the educational podcast. This is Dope People Podcast, Dope People in Education. What are your conversations that you're having with potential dividend yielding partners, right? That is making, what are you saying? What are you saying? Is it a regular business pitch where you're talking about the features and benefits? Why are they just jumping on? Are they jumping on because of the connections? And they want to get next to whoever your boss is, or they want to get next to, Howard Tolman? Are they, what is the draw? What are you saying?
So the first thing I do is start with my story, and because my story is the why, like why I'm doing this. Simon Sinek has that, always start with your why. And I believe that. So it's really compelling for people to know that, hey, the daughter of an educator always went to private school, but she wanted to fix the system that she perceived as somewhat broken. Like that narrative, a kid from Englewood who then goes on to earn like 3 degrees. One of them is an MBA. I'm working on my PhD. Like that, a Black woman from Englewood, just that narrative alone, who's breaking all those barriers, that becomes attractive to people. So now they sit up like, okay, she has a story. Let me listen to her story. And then I pivot into here's the picture. Here's a vision of education I am trying to create. This is the picture. A high quality school where black kids on the south side of Chicago can go, they can walk to, and they'll be prepared to enter the world after they leave us, right? From a mental perspective, from an emotional perspective, like they will be fully equipped to go out here and be productive folks, productive citizens, and actually affect change. So starting with my why and then pivoting to the picture or the vision of the world that I'm trying to create, right? Like giving people a glimpse into what's possible and knowing I really believe is possible. That passion, I think, grabs people. They like hear me and they're like, oh my God, like she's really serious about this, because I know that it can be done. So then that conversation just, turns to, so, what are some ways you think we could potentially partner? Like, do you see yourself in this vision? Do you see yourself as a part of this journey and this story, this thing that becomes this huge story? And with investors and people with a lot of money, they're always looking for ways to invest in something that could potentially, some of it is altruistic, but some of it is they need to invest. They have to find money. They have to find ways to donate and write some things off too, right? Like that's a part of it too. So it's this concept that Derek Bell, who is the father of critical race theory, which is under so much assault right now, ironically, He has this concept called interest convergence. So I really look for the areas where we can be mutually beneficial, right? But I don't sell it as like, look at this shiny thing. I really talk about the human beings that are involved and the potential impact that it could have on society as a whole. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I'm sure there's some educational leaders that you've helped crystallize their own vision for their school or their building. So you got Howard Tolman coming in, and he's helpful. He's a name, he's getting additional press almost weekly in business periodicals and magazines and around Chicago and obviously throughout the country, because Howard Tolman is a billionaire, right?
Right.
And then you got some other partnerships, and then we see Kanye show up at your school, and this is before Chance, if I'm not mistaken. It's like Kanye is showing up. How did that happen?
Yeah, so a couple interesting facts. First, Leonard GLC Harris actually.
Shout out to GLC, man. Shout out to GLC.
Very, very good friend of mine. We started off, actually, our friendship grew out of our initial partnership around marketing for diet. So GLC actually was one of the people who was helping me to secure like people like BJ the Chicago Kid and Common and John Legend. Like there were a whole host of folks.
Right, because John Legend did a song or something.
He did a video. He did a video, just encouraging people to check the school out and just talking about the importance of just the arts in general. Every week for a while, we had like a drop of some celebrity doing a video, and GLC was behind that. So GLC, of course, and Ye are childhood friends. And so they had that relationship. So on one of Ye's trips to Chicago, GLC actually said, hey, I want you to meet one of the top educators in the city. We're doing really good work at Diet. I want you to meet her and Howard Tolman. So Howard Tolman, myself, and Ye actually met at IIT. And he kind of toured IIT and was like, they had just built the new Kaplan Center. So that's how we met. That's how we initially met, like years ago.
Now, within the confines of working in a bureaucratic city like Chicago, where it is, Chicago Public Schools is one district and pretty much led by the mayor of the city, how easy was it for you to navigate getting those donations and having John Legend and BJ and Ye involved? Did you have to go through jump through hoops, or were you kind of green lighted? Were you a made woman and they said, have at it, gave you the blessing?
That's an interesting question. I didn't ask for a lot of permission. I'll be honest, like when it came to that kind of stuff, I'm like, I'll ask for forgiveness. Like if I put this video out and I get smacked on the wrist, but they really, I will say, because the situation was so tense and it was like a political hotbed, they really trusted me. And I will say this to Dr. Jackson's credit, right? She believed in me from day one and my ability to really do a good job at that school. She had my back from day one. So it was a situation where it was an unorthodox situation, which called for unorthodox approaches to revitalizing or reviving that school. It couldn't look like just any other reopening. And I think in some ways, they kind of looked at the reopening of Diet as a blueprint for the new Englewood STEM school and how they rolled that out. It really became sort of like a prototype for, if you want to open a high quality neighborhood high school, here's one way you could potentially do that. So they let me work. That's how I said, they let me work. Okay. And they started to see the results, right? So first year we had about 400 applications for 150 seats. And actually, they thought we would only get 125 students. We had 150 freshmen. And now I think it's at like 600. It's at 600. and it closed with 13 kids, right? So we had, I want to say, at one point we had more kids than King, which is selective enrollment school. So yeah.
Wow. And so you ultimately leave. How long were you at Diet? How long were you the principal of Diet?
There for a total of 4 years.
So you saw your freshman graduate.
I didn't,
because you had the year before.
I spent 1 year incubating.
1 year incubating, that's right.
So I did get to see them. Now you got to remember, the first class graduated during the pandemic. So we were online. Everybody was online. Yeah. So I technically got to see them graduate, and I gave like a virtual address. But I didn't get to physically see them graduate.
So it's 3 years later since you've been gone from Diet from now 3 school years. This is the third school year away.
Third year.
And you left. Why did you leave? Why did you leave CPS? Why didn't you stay?
I'll tell you. So I was there for 18 years. So I always worked in very difficult areas. I told you, on purpose. So Michelle Clark, I was there for 5 years. Well, I started at Gage Park. Let me start there. I taught at Gage Park. I became an assistant principal at Gage Park, which was not too far from where I grew up. So that was intentional. Then I went to the West Side and did a residency at Collins Academy before moving to Michelle Clark, my first principalship. That was a turnaround situation. So when I came to Clark, like literally kids were fighting from one end of the block to the other end of the block. Police were tasing folks. Like it was a mess when I first got there. Did that for 5 years, turned it around, went into Diet, incubated for a year, stayed 3 years. But I buried so many kids. More at Michelle Clark. I didn't lose any. Thank God, I didn't lose any kids at Diet, like to gun violence. But at Michelle Clark, I lost a lot of boys. I remember there were a couple summers in a row, a couple school years in a row, where literally 4 or 5 people from the same class, my Black boys, 4 or 5 of them from the same class, got murdered, right? So you go on to funerals, you carry that, right? You do a good job, you go to funerals, you carry it. I knew it was time for me to transition when my year before my last year at Diet, there was one of my kids who actually got shot in her house, like 125 pounds soaking wet freshman. In her house over there, I think in like Prairie Shores or something like that. She's in her house. Somebody comes in the house, starts shooting, right? She doesn't die, right? I go see her in the hospital, University of Chicago, and I see her laying there, and her mom is there, and she's telling her mom not to cry. Like the child is telling her mom, it's going to be okay. So, I tell mom and grandma, hey, I'm really sorry. We got your back. Whatever you need, just let us know. I come home and I break down. Because to see that little girl in that bed, not being able to move, because they almost shot near her spine. I think for the first time, it broke me. And I was really good before that at like keeping it all together. And that time I was like, okay, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, because this is traumatic to me now. Like it's secondary trauma. And I go to school the next day, because when stuff like that happens, you have to have your communications plan. You got to pull the teachers. You got to let them know how they need to handle the conversation. Let them know that it's okay if the kids need to grieve and pull them out and this and that, blah, 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 blah. So you're so busy like in being in go mode and being like that This is what I have to do. Oh my God, I just got teary-eyed. So I'm crying on camera, guys. Sorry. Cause I have to, it's really, it broke me. I was like, this is crazy. I don't know how much longer I could do this. Cause as a leader, you have to be able to keep it together for other people. And I didn't break in front of people, but when I got home, it broke me to the core. And so I was like, I need to do it differently, right? Like I need to make more me's, right? Because I'm just one person. So literally, I had an alumni event, a new leaders alumni event at Diet. And that is the program I went through to become a principal. And Arnie Duncan was there, a whole bunch of people there. The CEO of the organization was there. And I'll never forget, it was like, I just said before the event, I was getting towards the end, I'm like, I got to do something different. I just said that. I'm like, I just put it out there in the universe. I'm like, I got to do something different. As soon as I got done talking, I'm sitting next to the CEO. We're having lunch. He's like, so what's next for you? It was,
Wow.
It was like,
wow.
he was like, I think I got something for you. I said, I really want to develop principles. I really want to teach other people how to do this work at this level, because it can't just be one-offs. Like, I got to be able to be in a position to help other people do this way, particularly at the high school level. He was like, I got something for you. I think I do. Make sure you call me Monday. And like, the rest is like history. Like,
and that led you into out of CPS. You resigned.
Yes, I did.
And you started doing some independent stuff.
Yeah.
And I heard through the grapevine, I found out one day, you didn't tell it. I mean, you're active on social media, but you're very selective in what you put out there, as you should be, in my opinion. You handle that well. But I didn't know. I found out through the grapevine that you had moved to California.
I'm bi-coastal. I don't even know if it's bi-coastal.
Yeah, we call it bi-coastal.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Midwest and West Coast. Yeah.
Yeah. So I still have my place in Chicago because Chicago is home. But I should say this: I'm the executive director of an organization called New Leaders. That's what my job is. And we train principals across the country. It's a national organization. My portfolio is the Midwest region. So I work with a team of folks here in the Midwest, and we coach principals and assistant principals around leadership development in schools, elementary and high school.
Now, is that your organization, or is that you were hired by that organization?
I was hired by the organization, and this actually the organization I went through to become a principal.
And you're still the ED of the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Yeah. So I'm the ED for that organization. I also have a business, B Enterprises Consulting Group, and I actually consult people on school openings, right? Because that's the work that I did, turning the school around, early college STEM school, and then starting Diet. So I got an opportunity, and I'm very limited in what Scott, we've had this conversation. I'm very limited in what I can say because in my world, NDAs rule. But I can say that I had an opportunity to consult. Yay now. Yay.
No longer Kanye, not Kanye West.
Artist formerly known as Kanye.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I had opportunity to consult on the opening of Donda Academy, which is very exciting work. Lots of great things happening. But I was going back and forth. And so eventually I just had to kind of get a spot out there as well because I was just traveling so much. So, yes.
And some may say you live in a life. You got a crib in Chicago, a crib in LA, a crib in California. You get to fly back and forth a couple of times a week. And you live this, celebrity educator lifestyle that is modern. It's modern. It's nouveau. It's appropriate. It's millennial. You know what I mean? Even though I think you define maybe as not a millennial, but it's a millennial life. It's a millennial life. Are you having fun?
I'm having a blast. I'm having a
Yeah.
blast. There's nothing like winters in Cali. I'll tell
Yeah,
you
I
that.
bet. I bet.
It's
I've
a
yet to
beautiful thing.
experience a I've yet to experience a Christmas in California, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
before we get out of here, you've taken us, and I think it definitely warrants a comeback. We'd love to. I'd love to bring you back to dig a little deeper into some of the points that you brought about today. I think they would be very beneficial to some of our listeners and viewers here. But if you could send a message to educational leaders, particularly in America, but this has international appeal, what would that message be? What would you want educational leaders, secondary, post-secondary, elementary, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? What's your
Yeah.
message?
So I think three things. One is students first. Always put kids first. Like, I mean, students have to be at the center of our decision making. They have to be our why, right? They have to be our why. So students first. The second thing I would say is understand your North Star and never compromise your moral compass or integrity for anybody or anything as it pertains to children, right? Because particularly in this business of education, and I'm calling it a business now, because in some ways it is. There's a lot of money that floats around in the education space. People will ask you sometimes to do things that are against what you know is beneficial to children. So at that moment in time, understand your North Star and your why. And if it does not sit right with you, sometimes it's just better to just walk away from that particular thing, right? So kids need us. They're relying on us. Eventually they're gonna have to take care of us. That's why I'm invested in making sure we have a strong generation of young people who can really lead and think critically about the world around them, and make it better than we are leaving it, right? So that's what I would say.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Beulah Mcloyd, tell the people where they can find you. Where's the best place to connect with you?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So my website is beulahmcloyd.net. And on my social media profiles, it's all things at Beulah Mcloyd. So my Facebook, my Twitter, and one of my Instagrams. Beulah Mcloyd, the one I want
The one
people
that
to
we
see.
can follow you. The one that we can follow you.
Right,
If you know, you know. If you know,
right.
you know. Beulah Mcloyd, it has been an honor and a pleasure to listen to you this morning and to interact and engage with you. I am absolutely sure that many people will find value in this conversation, and we'd love to have you back on Dope People, the
Thank
Dope
you.
People podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I would love to come back. Thank you for having me as the first. I made history.
Inaugural interview.
Thank you so much. That
Absolutely.
means a lot to me.
Y'all clap it up for Miss Beulah Mcloyd giving us her time this today on Dope People Podcast. This is your man Big Stu, Scott Stewart, Professor Stewart. Depending on how you know me, and you already know what it is. Until next time, peace.